Today's episode of Future Ready Leadership is with Chris Nicholas. This was an episode that we actually released last year, but it was one of the most popular episodes of the year, so we wanted to re-release it again. Chris is the CEO of an $84 billion organization, and as the CEO, we're going to be talking about his approach to leadership and why it's all about impact and purpose. So in this episode, he's going to share some of his purpose-driven approach to leadership, and we're going to be talking about some of the strategies that have made him so effective at empowering his teams. We'll be looking at why leading with purpose is not just a buzzword, but it's so essential in creating a loyal and motivated workforce. He's also going to break down his unique trust equation, and he'll unpack a little bit more about what that is, how it applies, and how he uses it to inspire and empower his employees. We'll also explore a little bit more about Chris's leadership style, his approach, and how he leads his massive organization. So I hope you enjoy today's episode with Chris Nicholas. Hello, leaders. Welcome to another episode of Great Leadership. My guest today is Chris Nicholas, CEO of Sam's Club. It's a members-only warehouse club, which is a division of Walmart, Inc. They had revenues of $84 billion with a B dollars for fiscal year 2023. They have 100,000 associates and nearly 600 clubs. Chris, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jacob. It's exciting to talk about the business and, talk with you about leadership.
Yeah, for sure. Before we jump into that, why don't you give us just a little bit of background information about, let's start with a Sam's Club, and then I'm also curious to get your background information, specifically how you grew up, how you were raised, how your path took you to becoming the CEO of Sam's Club. So people not familiar with the company, let's start with that first, and then we'll jump to you.
Yeah, great. Really happy to do that. Sam's Club is a warehouse retailer. So what does that, a membership business? So what does that mean? That means that people pay for the ability to come shop with us. And why would you do that? The reason you do that is that we have a limited curated set of items that are incredible quality and incredible value. So this idea of we have merchants, these are the people that decide what we sell, they create new items, and their job is to find things that you just can't get anywhere else. And that the value of those items is so good that you're willing to pay to come be part of it. And so there's this really interesting idea of the business model, which is pretty cool, which is the reason we can be like 20% cheaper than retail, this is like than standard retail, is that we don't make any money from what we sell. We make all the money from the membership income that people pay us to be members.
Interesting.
And that's really interesting and different to the rest of retail. So our job is to run the business as efficiently as possible, as low cost as possible, put all of that into great value, great quality, great prices. And because that's so compelling, people continue to come back and pay membership and, and come back year after year, as well as tell their friends, and they come join you too. And it's super interesting because the club model, this model, you've got us, Sam's Club, and we're in a bunch of countries around the world. You've got others like Costco and BJ's is a slightly different model, but kind of similar. The club model is growing faster than retail in the US significantly, and we're seeing that because people are just really enjoying the value and the fact we're curating these items for people. So we help you to make choices. Maybe one other thing about Sam's Club is there's been this idea that in club retail that you can't have really great value and great items and have convenience. The idea is if you want convenience, so think friction-free checkouts, think e-commerce. If you have those, you're investing in those, and therefore you can't invest in prices. And part of the benefit of us being in Walmart is that we get to leverage all of the Walmart's technology and fixed asset investments, which means that we get to build e-commerce businesses and we get to build these great supply chain investments in ways that others couldn't, just because we're part of that broader enterprise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool. So let's talk a little bit about you. So how did you grow up? I'm always really interested when I talk to a lot of leaders and CEOs, how they got into the positions that they're in. You know,
Yeah.
is it something about how you were raised, something that you were taught, experienced in life? What was your childhood like?
Yeah. I mean, it is important, isn't it, to understand where people come from and how. And I grew up in the north of England, in this city called Hull, Hull, Hull.
So you must be very excited about the UEFA Euro Cup right now.
Yeah, yeah. So the game is in an hour and a half's time. England, Holland.
I know what you're
Uh,
going to be doing after this podcast.
yeah, you are 100% right. That's what I'm going to be doing, is watching that game. Uh, the So I grew up there. It's not a well-off place. This is about as far from London as you're going to get. So very few people have jobs. People do it tough up there, and people grow up without things. And I learn at a very early age the value of a penny, the value of a dollar, the value of a cent. And I had to start working early, and I started working in retail at the age of 14. And
Wow.
and because I needed to work, we needed the money, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the idea that if we work really hard, we can reduce prices for people and give people access to things they couldn't otherwise get, and that helps people feed their kids better. It helps people just take the burden of like not having enough time because they're working two jobs and they're doing all of. And this idea of like bringing innovation, bringing joy to people, working relentlessly to help them save money and live a better life, that resonated with me really early on. And so I've basically been in retail. There was a couple of things I did out here and there, but I've basically been in retail since. And this idea of retail getting in your blood, you've probably heard it before. I think you're either like a purpose-driven retailer who understands from a very young age how things work, or
Yeah.
you don't stay in retail because, razor thin margins, lots of hard work, and all of that. And my mum had a bunch of sisters. We grew up very happy, but without much money. And I think that the idea of like caring about the cents adds up when you're running something like this. And
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and so as I
Well,
stayed with
I'm actually
yeah,
curious about that first job really quick. So you said in retail at 14, was it at a grocery store?
yeah,
Do you remember
yeah,
what that was like? Was it just like a small town little grocer?
yeah, it was a grocer called Grandways, which was a small little grocer. It's since been bought up by like Sainsbury's or something, one of the big chains in the UK.
Hmm.
And my job was literally like zoning products. That's like making them so they all sort of come forward, pricing them with a pricing gun, unloading trucks, stocking the shelves. In fact, we make a joke with the folks here when we talk to them that one of the first jobs that I had on the first day was hiding inventory from the regional because the store manager had bought too much of it, and he would have gotten into trouble. So I think my first job was doing that. But you just got to do everything in this
Yeah.
10,000 square foot grocer, and it because it wasn't a wealthy place. People needed you, and people uh, and you would hear from people and their problems, and you would see at the end of the month the challenges that people had.
Yeah. I worked at Whole Foods,
You did.
one of my first jobs. So I did a lot of the same stuff as far as unpacking trucks
Yeah.
and working in the dairy cooler and in the freezer and stocking the shelves and doing all that stuff. So I can very much relate to that experience. Um, so do you remember how much you were paid in that job?
Oh, I think probably £1.85 an hour, something like that. It wasn't a lot, a couple
Wow.
of dollars an hour.
That's
It
crazy.
was, yeah, it's crazy.
So you go
It felt
from
like a lot
there.
of money though, honestly. Like
Yeah.
from having
We-
nothing, it
From
felt
nothing.
like a
Yeah,
lot.
for sure. And so what were your parents doing at the time? So it sounds like even though you guys didn't have a lot of money, you were still raised with kind of the right values. You were working hard. You understood the value of money, and that kind
Yeah.
of set you on that path very
Yeah.
early on.
Yeah, my dad never really lived with us, and my mum was one of. It was a classic sort of Celtic, Irish, Scotch, Catholic upbringing. So went to convent school. My mum was one of like seven,
Wow.
lots of sisters, all bringing me up collectively, me and my brother and sister and 30 odd cousins. So it was that kind of like everyone was there for each other, which is really great. But that sort of strict Catholic upbringing, brought that sort of moral tone we had. My mum was pretty strict about that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
that's kind of that strong moral code, regardless of what you believe in or not, is something that I think kept us all on the straight and narrow. Honestly,
Was it hard without the father figure there?
oh, I think I believe deeply that we all have our own agency, and that what we do is definitely a function of the past, but it's also a function of what you create every day.
Yeah.
And I am so unutterably grateful for my mum. She is a wonderful, wonderful human being. She was a nurse, palliative care nurse, her whole life. She found her vocation really young, just like I did mine. And I don't know,
Mm.
maybe there's something interesting there about me understanding the nature of vocation and me finding mine. They're probably connected in some
Yeah.
deep way.
When you look back, is there a moment or any particular moments in your life, especially when you were younger, that really crystallized in your mind either leadership or work ethic or kind of shaping who you are as a person? Like, do any particular stories come to mind for you?
Yeah, maybe I can start really, really young. So my nana, she was as Scottish as you could find. She and her two sisters owned a tiny, tiny little grocer, and it was literally in England. You've got these terraced houses; they're all very close to each other. On the bottom floor of the terrace, in the front room, was this thing called Mary Ann Barry's. I've got a picture of it. It's phenomenal. And then their job was to literally serve people on a bike. Like they would go and just deliver things around the neighborhood. And it would be literally a slice of cheese, two slices of bacon, half a loaf
It
of
was like
bread.
old school Instacart.
Really, but isn't it interesting, right? Because, or I would say Walmart and Sam's Club rather than Instacart. But the but this idea of like why were people only buying that? Because they had to work really hard that day just to be able to pay for what they needed to, and this idea of like survivability of life and hard work was just
Mm.
proximate from a really, really young age. And watching my mum work hard and watching all of her sisters work hard and was part of it. And I've always just been a worker, and I think that's just it's. There's no doubt that the environment you grow up in, where you feel lucky
Yeah.
to work, has a bearing on that.
Here's another good question for you. How do you identify overlooked top performers? How about uncovering potential leaders or individuals with the ability to close organizational skills gaps? And how do you do all of that quickly, fairly, and accurately? The answer: human intelligence from WorkHuman. See, their #1 rated employee recognition platform is a unique source of rich, authentic data. And combined with AI, that data puts previously inaccessible insights into talent and skills at your fingertips. And that's just the beginning. Human intelligence helps coach employees on what good peer-to-peer recognition looks like, turning every good job into better engagement, retention, and even more data. And it helps surface feel-good stories that illustrate the best of your company culture. To learn how today's leading companies are turning AI into a force for good with human intelligence, go to workhuman.com. That's workhuman.com. So when you say hard work, I mean, that's interesting. What does hard work mean? And maybe you could talk about kind of back then when you were younger and even today, because a lot of people I don't think fully understand. They think of a CEO or a top executive of a company and they think, oh, they get paid a lot of money, they get the great parking spot and big office, they kind of just get to chill, right? I mean, that's the perception that a lot of people have of CEOs. But unless you listen to this show, because I've interviewed a lot of CEOs, and the stories they share about the sacrifices they've made, how hard they work. I talked to Randy Parker, who's the CEO of Hyundai Motor North America. And, he was telling me these crazy stories about things were so tough for him at a certain point where he actually had to rent a house living separately from his family because things were so tense with the business that he couldn't be at home.
Yeah.
He was doing meetings at 10 o'clock at night, and then he would have to wake up at 5 in the morning to do 6 a.m. meetings. And it was just complete madness for him. And he made a ton of sacrifices. He had to go work in different parts of the world and live there. I mean, it was very hard. And I don't think a lot of people sort of understand and appreciate that when it comes to leadership, especially senior leadership. So what does hard work actually mean? And maybe you could share, kind of from your Nana's perspective and what hard work looks like for you today.
Yeah, I'm not going to look for like bleeding heart empathy from people because I feel so privileged to do this job. It's the idea that you can have impact that you would never have dreamed of at a young age, and to create positive differences for people is something that just gets you out of bed every day and is worthy. I think the hardest thing in the world would be to do something where you didn't feel purpose and you were turning up because you got paid. Like that for me would be hard. And I think that the idea of so I spent a lot of time early understanding my purpose and this idea of creating hope and being even a small part of creating the idea that the next generation and the next era can live more positively and can do more and can be better educated and better fed and have a better quality of life. I think it's really worthy, and a really important part of that is the ability to create opportunity. And I think it's this idea of come to a retailer for a job, for a good job, but stay for a great career is something that is not well understood and is something that is so profound. So we've got in Walmart US, which is where I was before here, and in Sam's Club now, 85% of our club managers and our store managers started as hourly associates. Many of them don't have any qualifications, and they're earning hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they are helping people that start as hourlies now to come through themselves. And this idea of creating opportunity for everybody, no matter your background, if you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to put the time and effort in, if you're willing to do the jobs no one wants to do, if you're curious intellectually constantly, those things, they're the things that set you up to have agency in the life you want to create. And I think there is nothing more powerful than a meritocracy where if somebody's willing to put the effort in, they're willing to learn, they're willing to coach and develop people, they're willing to be part of something greater than themselves, that they can create a positive and great career for themselves, but also for the other people that help them get there and that they are now going to help come through. That if you're achieving that, it doesn't feel like hard work. There is no doubt, though, that things do not come on a platter and there is no linear path. I've worked in 9 different countries. My wife and 2 kids have traveled all around with me. My boys were born in Budapest. They then moved to Poland, Denmark, Australia, and now the US. My wife, more countries, and me, myself, more than that. Why? Because it was fun, it was curious, and I was willing to put that at the front of the line. Now, does that mean that I didn't live with my mum and my cousins? Yeah. And does that mean that I don't get to see my friends enough? Yeah, it does. And does that mean I don't get to go see my beloved Hull City play soccer? Yeah, it does mean all of those things. But you've got to work out like what your meaning is. And if your meaning is to embrace a purpose, then it shouldn't feel like hard work, even though the hours are long.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in sort of the expectations that you have and the work that you put in usually lead to the outcome that you want to see. And oftentimes I find that there are a lot of people who, they want to work 30 or 40 hours a week and they assume, hey, I'm going to be a top executive or a CEO. But these leaders are working 60, 70, 80, 90 hours. I mean, it's crazy. Can you actually share what does your work day or work week look like? And then I want to circle back to the nine countries piece.
I will definitely do that. Just can I just make a point?
What's it like for you?
you just before you meant the point, which is a really interesting one about people wanting to, be a big exec or whatever. I think that if you approach things differently to that, it's helpful. So the idea that I've always had, and I try to coach people on, is if you focus on impact, like having an impact rather than hierarchy, good things will happen.
Yeah.
If you focus on, I want to be this person or that person or be this or that job, it just won't, because you're not spending your time creating and delivering. You're just spending time navigating around a situation, and navigating is not the way to create impact. And I think there's just something important and interesting about that.
Yeah.
The so here's my work week, and I'll chuck a couple of interesting. So I there's a few things I find really important. I spend a lot of time making sure that I stay healthy and fit. So I run stupid distances, like I do 100 milers in the Rockies and all of those
How many
things.
miles?
I run 100 milers, like I run long ultra marathons, and so you can find the time to do that. And
How long does that take, by the way, to run 100
it
miles?
it depends on the run. So I ran this one called the Leadville 100, which is up in Colorado, and that's up through the Rocky Mountains, and that took 27 hours. But I've run flatter
Wow.
ones that take a lot less time than that, like 20 hours. But this idea that I've Megan, my wife, who I met at college, and I've got two boys, 13 and 12. Like, my job is to be present for those guys and to be a great father. My job is to like be good for myself, because if you invest in yourself, like from a well-being point of view, then I'm full of positive energy from them, and I'm full of the positive energy of having my own interest, and you get to pour that back into what you're doing. And I think this idea of like hanging on to the minutes that you fractiously take at the end of a day isn't the right way to think about leadership. Because if you've got nothing left to give, then you're just on this like journey of negative sort of energy that eventually just won't end well. Your job is to be at your best every day, is to bring the best out of people, is to empower people, listen to people, create trust, which we can talk about. And
Yep.
I am in early. I'm a retailer, so I get up at 4:35. I'll go for a run. I get into the office at 7. I'm all the while hydrating and eating well and all of that. I'll spend an hour just getting my head around the world, working out what's happening, reading, catching up, reading the journal, reading my emails, and then you're into the day. And sometimes maybe twice a week, that's traveling, getting out to see clubs, getting out to see suppliers, getting out to see distribution centers, getting out to find inspiration, traveling the world, doing all of those things. That's a couple of times a week. On a Monday and on a Friday, it's all business. So on a Monday,
Yeah.
it's like, how did last week go? What are we going to do this week? All in the detail. On a Friday, it's like, right, how are we set for the weekend? Let's go. And everything else in the middle is about how do we move forward. And
How many hours would you say you put in a given day or week?
uh,
Like honestly, if so,
yeah,
up at 4:30.
yeah.
What time are you done with work on a
I'm
typical day?
probably done. I mean, look,
And I guess for you, done. There's no such thing as done, right? I mean,
yeah, I
you're
think
always.
that's the point, is that the hesitation is that you're never really done. I think the key to it is, how do you stay present when you're not in the office, where you need to be. And so, look, if it was 5 days a week, 6 days a week in the office, that would be, that would be fine. But it's not. I would argue that I probably spend 12 hours a day fully immersed, and then stuff around the edges, that you just need to be present to take calls or do the work that you need to do. And then every couple of weeks, you're out at the weekend just traveling facilities. And
Even on the weekends, you're still traveling facilities.
yeah, here's the thing, Jacob. I The energy that I get from being in a club and speaking to associates is just worthy. My kids sometimes come with me, so they love it too. They'll love to just
Wow.
walk a store. They'll give me feedback on the club. But here's the thing, like, my hourly associates are working weekends. My hourly associates are working at night time. So like how is it for me to just say, no, I'm going to work 8 till 4, 5 days a
Yep.
week and good luck? You can't do it. And in fact, you don't really understand the business unless you're out and about. But I find the job of balance of all of that is a job in itself for sure. But it is just about balance. And sometimes you do find yourself slightly out of balance, and you need to have a good group of people around you to help you see that you may that you need to rebalance. And my wife is one of those, but my friends are too, and my kids are truth tellers too. And I've got
So you're probably putting in what, like 70, 80 hours a week?
probably.
So what do you say to people? So and I find this to be very common and true for a lot of executives, especially when they get to kind of that CEO level. What do you say to some employees? And I don't know if you've ever had this conversation with any of your employees who say, Chris, I really want work-life balance. I really want to work, 30, 40 hours a week. And I want to be an executive at this company. I want to be a director, a VP, an SVP. How do I become, somebody in a similar role like you, but I only want to work 30, 40 hours a week? I don't want to make these sacrifices. My belief is that that's not possible. That how much you put in, how hard you work, the impact that you make, you can't get to that level without making those sacrifices. And I feel like there's a little bit of a narrative sometimes that's trying to be told, where it's like, you can have work-life balance, you can do 32 to 40 hours a week and, just work really hard during those 40 hours and still somehow get to that level. I've never found an example of anybody who's been able to do that. Do you ever have those conversations with your employees, and what do you tell them when they want to just, have that balance and still get to that level?
I think I'm very, very careful to not set an expectation or to sort of glorify the hours, because I don't think that's productive. I think that,
and it's not for everybody.
It's not for everybody. And what you're sort of teasing at, which I think is an important point, is this idea of impact versus entitlement. So it's fine to tell people you want to do things and to feel that you have your route and your compromises, but you will run into at some point where that doesn't work, and your job then is to decide, is the balance that you're willing to accept a balance that that's achievable, and maybe in one company it is, one it's not. I've not found it to be true in retail, that you can work less than others and get what you need. I would say this, that you need to, if you care. I know I keep going back to it, but it's so important to me as a person that if you have purpose and you believe in impact, then that's what you should be focusing on. And I have these conversations. I'll tell you a conversation I am having with my team is, if you find there's this whole work in the office, work remotely conversation. So we believe deeply that us being together is much more productive because we collaborate more, we move faster, we make quicker decisions. People develop more together. They make better decisions because they have combined experiences. We find that really important. A conversation I have had with my team is, if you find yourself negotiating to work as few hours as possible, or if you find yourself negotiating with your manager to have as few days as possible with your associates in the office, you maybe need to ask yourself why you're doing that. Why are you negotiating to do as little as possible when we are so clearly, a force for good and a purpose-driven organization? And maybe there are some organizations that require so little of people. I haven't found one, Jacob, but I think this idea of reality meeting hope, sure, maybe some people can hope to work fewer hours and have the magic, and maybe some people can get away with that. But I think the idea of being energized through impact is the thing that I focus on.
These days, it feels like there isn't much good to go around in the world of work. But Workhuman knows when we celebrate the good in each of us, we bring out the best in all of us. It's why they created the world's #1 employee recognition platform. And they didn't stop there, combining rich recognition data with AI to create human intelligence so you can get uniquely good insights into performance, skills, engagement, and more. To learn more about how you can join their force for good, go to workhuman.com or check out their own podcast, How We Work, which explores the trends, issues, relationships, and experiences that shape our workplaces. Well, I also think it's important to have honest conversations, right? I mean, it almost feels like today you get in trouble for doing that, right? I mean, like if you as a leader go to your employees and say, hey, look, I know you want to get promoted in this company and you want to become a director or a VP and you want to move up the ranks, but I have to be honest with you. You're not going to make all your soccer games for your kids. You're not going to be able to work 32 to 40 hours a week because you can work as hard as you can during that time and you can make as much of an impact as you can during that time. But there's also your peers. There's also a lot of other people around you who are going for that same spot as you. And you might have one position open for leadership and have dozens of people trying to go for it. So I think it's also important to be honest with people and say, hey, you have the potential to get into that leadership role, but you need to decide if it's going to be worth making those sacrifices for you, where sometimes you're going to have to come in on weekends. Sometimes you're going to have to wake up early, stay late. Sometimes you're going to have to miss things that you care about. It's a choice for you to make. And to your point, it's not for everybody. But then again, leadership isn't for everybody. Being an executive isn't for everybody. Leading a team isn't for everybody. And I just wish that we had more of these honest conversations because I don't know, it almost feels like sometimes we try to paint just the overly rosy picture of what it takes to get to that point. Same thing in sports, right? I mean, if you were to ask any of the players who play for England's national team or any tennis player or basketball player or any star, right? They're in there before everybody else. They leave at the very end. They play and practice until their body hurts. They put in tremendous time and effort into it. And I feel like leadership is the same way. We just don't spend enough time exploring that. So I wish that message came through for more people, especially this younger generation coming into the workforce, Gen Z. Where I don't know. Sometimes I don't feel like it always clicks.
Yeah, I feel like in the vast majority of cases, people are logical and thoughtful, and they find the right group of mentors around them that help them see what those trade-offs are. And around the edges, you don't see it. And I think, but I definitely, maybe it's in retail because you so obviously are so connected with people who are working on the front line that it's less of a thing. But I think it's probably around the edges. There's this idea of impact is maybe something that's interesting. And working hard is important. But let me tell some of the things that I think are really interesting here are that working hard is not doing the work of others. Working hard is creating the conditions that allow a business to succeed. And if I think about what that means for me, I think the greatest joy I feel, is watching a team that you've empowered, that you trust, create momentum that goes way beyond what you could do yourself, or take the ideas way beyond what you thought were possible. So this idea of listening, most ideas come from the folks that are closest to the front line, empowering people as deep in the organization as possible. You do those two things, you will move at the speed of the delegation that you've given to people, the trust that you've allowed people to have. And so for me, if I'm able to create an environment where people are clear on what we want to do, and you can delegate down to the hourly associates in the clubs so that they can then make decisions on behalf of members and on behalf of the business, guess what happens? They feel meaning. And that meaning that they feel, that helps the business move faster. And there is something that matters within that, and that's trust. They need to trust that their leaders are there to support them, that if they mess something up, that's okay. I've got this guy I know. He's an absolute legend. He's a class 5 rapids master. So he's one of my mentors, and he navigates these rapids around the world, on
Oh,
the
wow.
rafts. And he's got this story that really stuck with me, and it's that, and it's all about the idea of, you have a you. So imagine this: you're at the top of the rapid, class 5 rapid. It's a big, hairy, scary thing, and you know where you want to get to, which is the bottom of that rapid. And what is for certain is that the plan that you've got from the top to the bottom is not going to work out. Like, you have to continuously navigate, change, and he can't do that. It has to be all the people that he's delegated to in the boat that help them get to the bottom. And sometimes things go wrong, and the job is not to try and over explain to people what they need to do in the middle of a rapid. It's not to blame people or look back or, critique people. It's to get to the bottom together, and to make those decisions, to get to the win at the end. And the time to look back and the time to talk about what didn't go well, that's around the campfire afterwards. And there's something really nice about that analogy, because the campfire is everyone's calmed down and everybody's relaxed and everybody's talking to each other openly in a circle. That idea, if you can empower your people as close to the front line as possible, to have the trust that the conversations about how you get better are campfire conversations, not in the middle of war conversations. What happens there is you take away the need for you as a leader to be the bottleneck that's the person that's driving the decisions. And so for me, if I can reserve the decisions I take and the time I spend to the big things that matter, that create the ability to be the steward of the culture, to move us along on our journey towards our vision, that takes a lot of burden away from the day to day. And the reason you can do it is you create the trust that people really deep in the organization give you ideas and can make decisions. So I think there's something about the freneticism or the frenetic nature of decisions shouldn't need to exist if you've created the right conditions to win.
I'm also curious, you mentioned that you lived and worked in different countries, different parts of the world. How important do you think that global perspective is for leadership, especially when you get to that senior leadership role?
Yeah.
Because some people might say, well, I've never done that. I can't do that. I don't have the opportunity to do that. Can I still end up leading a global organization? Or is that kind of a prerequisite? A lot of the CEOs that I've talked to, and a lot of even top executives, all have similar stories.
Yeah.
They lived and worked in different parts of the world. They led different teams. They get that experience, different cultures, backgrounds, and it really helps them a lot.
I really believe that range is really important. I think, there's the whole outliers idea of 10,000 hours or something and you become excellent at it. That's fine in a repeatable environment, but range is crucial. So how do you build range? Sometimes I think international experiences where you are completely out of your depth, you have to work out new cultures, you have to solve problems that have not been solved before with nobody around there to help you, is a really good way to build range and to build empathy and to understand context. It's not the only way though. And I think that what I would say is that continuously being in search of experiences, being open to and willing to take risks, understanding that real experience is non-linear. It is not just a linear journey. Being deeply intellectually curious and finding and tracking down resourcefully those people that can help you see things differently. If you take that approach, then you don't necessarily have to have lived abroad. I just would argue that it helps because all of those differences are not intellectual anymore. They're real. You see them and you've felt them and you've been through difficult situations. And I think I mentioned the word context there, and I think context is really important. So what might feel like a crisis for somebody who's the first time they're going through it, for somebody who's lived around the world and has seen all kinds of different craziness, it just won't feel like that crisis. It will feel like something that, you can help coach people through. And I think that helps for sure, being a leader. But I would place running hard at difficult things, intellectual curiosity, building range, not looking for linear career paths, I think they are all the things you get from working abroad, but they're also things that you can cultivate here in the US, which is a huge, place.
I love the run to hard things. So a couple, I don't know if it was a month ago or a couple of weeks ago, I sat down with my wife and our two kids. I have a 4-year-old son and a soon to be 8-year-old daughter. And we were coming up with like values for the house, family values. And one of the things that we jotted down on there is run to hard things. And we have that kind of scribbled on a little piece of paper. Eventually we'll kind of make something cool out of it. But it's one of the things that we wrote down there. And it's been very, very common from a lot of the CEOs and leaders I've interviewed and worked with. I say, how did you get into your role? And they say, well, I took on the position or the role that nobody else wanted. Everybody was scared of this. And I raised my hand and said, I want to be the one to do it.
Yeah.
And you kind of do whatever you need to do to succeed in that role. And that really puts the spotlight on you. Again, not for everybody. A lot of people a lot of people are very, very uncomfortable doing that. And I think it takes a special kind of person to do it. But if you can do it, I mean, you're really, really setting yourself up for success. I want to shift gears a little bit to a section of the podcast I call the Leader's Toolkit, where we talk about something practical and actionable that a lot of the leaders listening to this and watching this can do. And for this one, we're going to talk about trust and how to build trust. What does that mean? What does that look like, especially for a leader? But kind of leading into that, I'm actually curious, do you have any leadership guiding principles or mantras that you use that kind of define your approach to leadership?
Yeah, it's such a big topic, and I think trust is an excellent one to sort of orient on. I think that, let's just I'll touch on something quickly, which is that if you want to create, your job ultimately as a business leader as a CEO in particular, you've got to leave the place better than when you found it. You need to have a winning strategy. You need to go and get after it. And to do that, you need to respect the past. You need to embrace the culture. But really importantly, you need to create this sense of positive dissatisfaction for where you've got to go. And that's really hard because if people need to believe in you, and I'll go into like this trust, the thing I call the trust equation, I've learned over the years, this idea that you can, so in retail in particular, very competitive, and the idea that you don't continuously have this sort of positive dissatisfaction means you're just going to get eaten alive at some point, and you maybe just don't see it coming. There's this saying in retail, which is that loyalty in retail is the absence of something better. So like, you better create that better thing, otherwise people will So if you need to take 100,000 people with you on that journey, they better trust you, because otherwise they're not going to come along with you on that journey. And yes, there's work to do with the board and with your sort of shareholders and others, but the hard work is taking the whole organization with you. And I've found that thinking about trust in an equation is really helpful. Now, this maybe makes me sound a little bit like the economist that I am, but the trust is a function of credibility plus reliability plus intimacy. All of that is divided by self-interest. Otherwise said, if you're credible, i.e., you've done the job before, people know that you're going to be great. If you're reliable, you do what you say you're going to do, and you take the time to create intimate relationships, that's fine. But if people don't believe that you are not there for them, people need to believe you're there for them. They need to believe that you care about their purpose. You need to believe you're connected with their culture, because the second they don't believe that denominator divided by self-interest undermines everything. So the idea of creating a strategy that embraces everybody, that creates this sense of belief that you respect the past and you respect the culture, and you show that is actually the time spent doing that is actually the thing that allows you to run really hard at the future. So this idea of people being able to see in a leader that you are not leading with self-interest, I think is all important. I really do. If you want to move a mass of workforce quickly, and effectively in the right direction. And there are a whole load of ways to do that. And I found that the most impactful way is to listen to people and take action.
So how do you make this equation come to life? So there are a lot of leaders who are listening and watching this. They're thinking, I love that equation. I want to make it come to life on my team, in my company. How do you do that? Like, is it possible to break that down into like a series of steps? Like if you could give people, I don't know, 3 to 5 actions to take to create trust with their team.
Yeah.
Could is it possible to break it down into those steps?
Yeah. I mean, everyone will find the environment that they're in and they will decide what the right steps are for them. But what's worked for me, the first thing you have to do is you have to have a team that are aligned with where you want to go, a leadership team.
Okay.
If you don't have a leadership team that are aligned with where you want to go, you don't get to do anything else. Because
what if you're not in a leadership role to be able to shape that team? So you're not a top executive, maybe you're a mid-level leader and you can't really shape much of that leadership team. You're just kind of a part of a team, but you want to still kind of create trust.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we can, fine. So answering as a CEO, job number one is like having a group of folks that want to come along with you on the journey, because without that sort of sense of common purpose, now that common purpose for some people might be money, fine, but it's just not for me. But that's certainly a journey. The self-interest piece and the intimacy piece is the important bit. So one of my mentors tells me often of the importance of connection. So the reason I'm in clubs and facilities and visiting suppliers is I'm building intimacy with people. I'm understanding about them, they're understanding about me. Why? Because having common purpose is important, and that doesn't mean sharing my purpose, like as in what do I want from you. It's I do better by understanding what Jacob wants out of me and what I want out of Jacob, and we will come to a collaborative, positive outcome as a result. If you're not spending time when you're creating these intimate relationships with people, if you're not spending time understanding what they want and you spend all of your time telling them, you're doing it wrong. Don't be doing more than 50% of the speaking. Do more, orient on the listening. And this idea of trust happen. So I love this thing of trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets. And this idea of, you need to spend. So there's a guy that, previous CEO of Coca-Cola, he tells me often that if you're not having good quality conversations with 100 people a week, you're not doing your job. Wow. And it doesn't have to be like an hour's meeting. It's, finding out something about them, finding out about their business, walking around. I walk around a lot around this office. We have an open plan environment entirely. And what you find is that every single day, just as you walk around and chat to people, you just find things out and people feel validated as a result and they tell their friends. So this intimacy doesn't have to just be one-on-one. It's this environment you create. The self-interest piece, though, I have learned in this job and in my last job that you are never, ever, ever, ever done with communicating the why of what you're doing. It's so important. And often I will remember to tell people that I would not change the past, and I recognize positivity about the current culture. But the one time I forget, I get feedback from people like, you're just changing things. And this is like a year into this job. People still want to hear it. They still want you to reinforce that I am here for you. And I think there's a skill to making sure that you get your point across whilst respecting people, but it's never done. And I'm doing that consistently, whether it's out in facilities, whether it's here in the home office. I'm there connecting and I'm there communicating. And I think as a CEO, your job to be the coach, to be the chief communicator, to be the cheerleader. That's never done. And if you're not spending a significant amount of your time doing that, then you can't expect people to come along with you. Another really cool saying that I once heard, and I'm sorry to keep bringing out all of these sayings, but you did ask, is that if you don't tell people about yourselves, about you, about who you are, about sharing things about you. Why did I share about running? Because I wanted to create some, like, give you some of me. I shared some of my family because I wanted to get. If you don't do that, people will fill the vortex because people want to know about you. The thing that was a shock becoming the CEO was just how carefully people watch and listen.
Mm.
And it's not just the big things. It's not just the stuff on the stage. It's if you walk to get a coffee and you're looking at your phone instead of have your head up, people will infer something from it. So this idea of
You're really
understand
viewed and scrutinized as a leader, huh? Like people look at
all of the
every.
time,
Yeah.
and so, but that's okay if you know it. Yeah. Anyway, so
No, that's actually really interesting because a lot of people don't think about that, right? I mean, um, if you're a junior level employee and you're walking to get a coffee and you're looking down or staring at your phone, nobody's going to think something of that. But if they see you as a top executive or as a CEO doing that, they might think, is something wrong? Chris looks upset. Is the business struggling? So in a sense, I guess you always have to be on.
yeah.
But then how do you also balance the vulnerability side with that? Because you also don't want to fake, if you're going through a tough time or if the company's struggling, it's also important to be able to communicate that with your employees. So how do you
Really is.
balance the importance of the vulnerability and
Yeah.
authenticity with the always being on? Because that's also probably an important factor of building trust. If you're not genuine and people are like, yeah, I know something's wrong, but Chris is just always smiling and walking around, that doesn't help with trust either.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And I think that idea of authenticity is really important. You use the word, and I think it's a crucial word. And that idea of constantly being connected with people, not just your leadership team, that doesn't work. It needs to be deep. Allows people to, first of all, if people feel positively towards you as a person, they will give you the benefit of the doubt. The second thing is, if you inadvertently send a message through, having a furrowed brow because you had an argument at home or whatever it might be, that you'll hear about it and someone will tell you, and then you can address it. And also just this, like, using humor, being self-deprecating. These are important things because, like I say, people know the realities anyway, and if you avoid them, then what happens is people will make up their own reality. And so there is definitely a truth to, as a leader, as a CEO, that you have to give more of yourself than you might have been used to. And because if you don't do that, then people will infer things that maybe, they ought not to. And as a leader, like, that can undermine the pace of change that you want to achieve. So you just got to get comfortable with it. It's actually a cool thing to do, and you've got to like people for sure. But as long as you get comfortable with it, you're okay. You can draw lines. I don't share inappropriate things, but yeah.
It's kind of the, did you ever hear of the reality distortion field idea?
No, what's that?
So the reality distortion field idea, it was developed, I think it was in the 80s, and it was in relation to Steve Jobs and how when he was around different developers and different people, he like shaped this reality because he was so charismatic and he believed so much in the product and the future of Apple that he had the ability to distort the reality of the people he was around, where even if people didn't believe in anything, after spending time with Steve Jobs, like that became their new reality. Yes, Apple, Apple. And so it's kind of a concept that's oftentimes described for a lot of leaders where, they have this ability to shape this reality and inspire and motivate and engage people in a certain way that they believe in this new reality. Because if they don't, to your point earlier, it's kind of hard to take people on this journey with you.
I love the idea. I think there's a hugely important part to it, as long as it's also grounded in, you get to do that because you're Steve Jobs or you're Elon Musk or you're Doug McMillan or any of it, like, trying to create a different future because you see it and you believe on where you go. But the results also need to be real. And,
Yes.
You can't create a reality distortion field and then, and not have the win. And this is where you get to, like, what I said earlier on is your job is to leave the place better than you found it, is to win, is to create a winning strategy. And sure, there is, like, inspiration, and taking people with you is a huge part of that. Huge.
Yeah, to your point, the reality distortion field only works if the reality at some point matches with it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's kind of a huge waste of time. Maybe one more question for you is, what are the big mistakes that you see leaders make when it comes to building trust? So where do people oftentimes fall down? Where do they stumble? I would imagine, for example, lack of authenticity is a huge one, where they try to create trust, but they don't do it in an authentic way, and people can kind of tell you're BSing them. Have you seen any other mistakes that leaders make when it comes to building trust?
Yeah, I think that you mentioned authenticity. We've talked earlier about the importance of just being straight with people. I think that's all real. I think the big mistake that people will make and do make, and I've seen it myself, is an unwillingness to believe that it's your job as the leader to convince people they should trust you. So this idea of positional authority, this idea of I am in this job and therefore you must, is a fallacy. It's not real.
Yeah.
And you can spend all of your time believing that what you're saying is working, but it doesn't. Your job is to convince people, and you do that through listening and by being empathic and by delivering what you say you're going to deliver. And so don't fall into the trap of believing that positional authority confers this ability for you to earn free trust. It's quite the
Yeah.
opposite.
And any other mistakes that you see people make, or is it usually just around that?
Oh, I think we are replete with imperfections as leaders. And all of us. And I think maybe one thing that I would say is don't underestimate the power of culture.
Hmm.
So and in fact, you need to use it. So this idea that as a CEO, your job is to come in and put your stamp on things and make sure that it's not the last person's. It's definitely yours. Is a real challenge when you're faced
Yeah.
with strong culture. The real power is to respect the culture and respect where you are, whether you believe it or not, and build on it. Because then you get to take the energy of the organization with you
Mm.
versus working against the energy of the organization. And I found that to be very effective.
Yeah, that's a
But
great
it's a
one.
real investment in time, and
Yeah,
it's worth it.
couldn't agree more. All right, I know that you want to run check out the England game. Going to be very, very
I
exciting. I'll be
do.
watching that as well. Where can people go to learn more about you? Anything that you want to mention for people to check out? I know you're on LinkedIn, but anything else you want to let people know about?
I think I would encourage people to just come visit a Sam's Club. I have to say it, and why? Because we are creating this really cool environment of digitization of the workforce and digitization of a shopping experience that's never been done before.
Hmm.
And I am on LinkedIn. Feel free to drop me a message. I'm always happy to talk. And Jacob, it's just been such a joy just talking with you about leadership. It's always good to reflect a little bit, and your questions are great.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. I enjoyed the conversation very much, and I hope people will check you out on LinkedIn. I'm very excited to get this episode out there to the world. And again, thank you for your time, and thank you everybody who tuned in, whether you're watching on YouTube or checking it out on Apple Podcasts or whatever your preferred platform is. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to share it with somebody who you would like to see become a better leader, and I will see all of you next week. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Future Ready Leadership. If you want to get access to more content on how you can become future ready, make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. It's thefutureorganization.com/newsletter. And if you enjoyed this episode, please send it to somebody who you would like to see become a better leader. Thanks for listening or watching, and I will see you next time.